that, if you knock it off, you're not going to trip yourself, So of course I tried it too, and I didn't trip myself. So as long as I can do it, I know my kids will do it 10 times better.
Thank you for that. Karen, do you have anything that you could add?
It's been interesting. I've actually resorted to looking into other areas of athlete development, like following some PE teachers here and in the UK, and finding out other kinds of activities to improve even just physical literacy. It doesn't even have to be soccer specific, because they're so young, they need to develop that as well. So doing things like a paper plate with a wooden spoon, or something on it, or a spatula, and a balloon, and hitting it over, a set of chairs or something like this. They can make sort of different kinds of things. They can do that with golf if they have like a Nerf ball. You can do, as you look around, you start to discover all these PE teachers who have gotten so creative. One of them did an interesting sort of physical literacy and coordination, sort of functional stability, balance, proprioception stuff with like modeled after what is that name of that a peri-peri chicken. So if it's green, it's the big sort of an introductory level activity, and then they can choose medium and try to go to, and it has a color of the pepper with it, and so you can go to the next level of spice. And then the red one, the red pepper, means that it's very hot. It's a little bit more advanced. And she created some really interesting sort of like visual things to associate for the kids. So that's pretty much what I've really learned a lot about more lately.
Yeah, it seems like I think you and Jennifer are both going down the same path. It's like, find stuff that's in your house. There's stuff that we used to make the Calvin ball stuff out of, or create the games, and it seems like if it's not put together for them, they're less likely to do it. So trying to come up with those creative ways to find them. Did you have good results, bad results when you were creating these activities?
It's funny that you're talking about this, because I did find that the people whose parents were more involved and engaged sort of got them going on different things more so, or even sort of helped stimulate their minds to be more creative, to find ways to do things. Sometimes when they didn't have the parent support, whether it's the parents are out on the front lines doing work and are sort of out there in the workforce still, or whether they're serious and both parents are working from home and stressed out because they're working from home, and some of them have multiple kids, and so they really just almost didn't have the energy or the time to perhaps to kind of be as engaged in it with the kids. So I've seen kind of the whole spectrum.
The 5 minutes are just about up, so I'm gonna do you want me to bring them back in?
Yep.
Okay.
And if you have any, Jennifer and Karen, if you want to type some notes into the chat box, and that's what we're going to ask everybody to do, some thoughts. But we'll probably go with the mic also about some of the ideas that you've had.
Okay, it's ending. They should be back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All righty, so it looks like we have everybody back. Hopefully you had some interesting conversations. We're going to go about this 2 ways. If you could jot down some notes in the chat box, and Loy's going to monitor the chat box for us on games that you came up with or games that you tried, and even the results. A few of them, though, in the main room, we had Jennifer and Karen, and I've asked them to share some of the discussion that we had. So we'll start with Karen. And Karen, if you'd like to share some of the games you had and what the results were with the group, that would be helpful.
Sure. I was just typing into the chat box as well. It's really forced me to be more creative in what we're doing, and I started following some PE teachers on social media that were here in the UK, and some of them have really come up with some fun ways that the kids can get engaged to develop their physical literacy. So even making a paper plates as tennis rackets on taped onto something, and with a balloon play over a set of chairs. Sort of, they have lots of different really interesting ideas. Some of them were really creative in how they associated the level of difficulty with something fun like peri peri chicken. That they did like a peri peri comparison. So a green pepper would be an introductory level activity versus yellow versus red, etc. So just some thoughts like that. It's been really interesting for me to see that.
Thank you for that. And how was the response? Did they enjoy it, what they were doing on the field?
Some of them, it's interesting also that some of them are in apartments because, we're in a metro area. Some of them don't have as much space. Some of them have siblings to play with or parents who can engage or do engage more. The ones who had obviously more support or, opportunities to play with people were a bit more engaged in those.
Thanks for that. Jennifer, you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I typed it into the chat box, just trying to get my kids outside both are soccer players. I live in Marshfield, Massachusetts. Getting them outside to design their own obstacle courses and let them bring that creativity in, because they're also probably on social media seeing what other kids might be doing. But just grabbing what's in the garage and, thinking about when my son played ice hockey, having sticks suspended up in the air so that you'd have to jump over it, even on hockey skates. So that's where that idea came from, making your own gates, whether going over them or under them with ball passes around the yard. I mean, that's kind of what we've started with. So, but one of the reasons why I signed up for this webinar is to hear some more ideas from all of your coaches. So thank you for letting me participate.
You're very welcome. Thank you. I'll go to Loy. And Loy, anything in the chat box that jumps out that you think would be good to share?
Yes, Rick wrote juggling bingo, wall ball. Then you have Matt with bingo card that contains fitness, soccer items, and life items. So whatever, if you can say B1 is B, juggle the ball 3 times. I run around or whatever. Stephanie wrote about doing some activities with the family, incorporating the ball. That's just about it.
Okay, so it's nice that we see there's some creativity going on and trying to find the tools that we already have. So it's not like, well, we don't have soccer equipment, so it doesn't work. There's other ways around it also. So when we think about it, where do games come from? How do we create these when they happen? And I live in a neighborhood that has about 10 kids, and sometimes some yards are bigger than others. Some areas that they play in are bigger than others. Sometimes it's in a driveway. Sometimes it's on a side street or a hill. When I'm out doing yard work or I'm out walking my dog and I see the kids out playing their yard, I see what the games are that they're playing. How excited are they about the games that they're playing, like a 4-square game or, just playing tag with each other in the backyard. And right away it kind of pops into how can we make that a soccer game? And really it's kind of a curse. If anybody's ever driven through the Midwest, which I know Ian has, sometimes you drive by a big open field, a farm or something, and you just start thinking, God, that could be 100 soccer fields, or that could be 20 soccer fields. I could squeeze it into that space. So right away you start popping into how I can make that land or make that space into the soccer space that I want it to be. So when you think about what do you need to play games? Sometimes it might just be empty bottles or garbage cans or benches or even trees. Something that could be a target or an obstacle or something to get to, over, or around. and how we can make those into the games. It goes from, as Karen and Jennifer hinted to, it's looking through your garage. What do we have? What toys are in there that we could bring out?
Yeah.
And then the part of it is making it so, how can we turn this now into a game? Now remember, when you're picking these objects in the house, and this is a Loyism, the big window in the backyard is probably, the big window in the living room is probably not a good target for a goal. It's making sure these things are not breakable and they're safe to use. And ultimately, it's nice to have a soccer ball. But a soccer ball is not the only ball you can use. You could use the rubber gym balls or the dollar store air balls that may not last very long, but you could have a lot of fun trying to play different games with whatever balls are available for you to use. I watched one kid that was trying to juggle with his feet a basketball. Wasn't even a soccer player, but that's what he had, and he was just trying to do it, just for fun. He only tried for about 5 minutes, but just coming up with different things that he could do in his yard with his game since he got sick of playing basketball for a while. So we think about the tools or the equipment that we have, equipment needs. Now we start thinking about, how much space do you really need to have a game, to play? And if you think about your neighborhoods, and in Utopia, everybody's yard looks like this. Nice green grass, flat, groomed to perfection. And some people do have that luxury that they get out there and play in their yard. But other people, not so much. It might only be a street or a small yard or a hillside. But if you could find a 10 by 10 or a 20 by 20 space that you could get into, set up an area to play, there's a lot you could do within that amount of space. Even a little space like this, that's only maybe 4 steps by 20 steps, has turned into a playground at times for kids to play in, where they could kick a ball or hit a ball or do something in this little tiny space. So, when we start thinking about the games, we have to try to force ourselves to start thinking outside the box, thinking about what's available to us. So, what I'd like to do is have another breakout session, and this one is going to be a little bit longer. We're going to give you 8 to 10 minutes or so. And within your group, think about the stuff, think about what's in your garage or what's in your house, and how much space you have for you to work in. And let's see if you can make up your own game with the people in your group, or come up with a game that you think will work. Now, a few parameters to that when we're making a game. It has to be limited with the number of people, because right now we're dealing with social distancing. So a game with 2, 3, or 4 people. And remember, usually these are all going to be siblings or parents or whoever happens to be living in the home. Think about a game that you could make that would keep everybody safe and would keep their interest for a while, something that they would be excited about playing. Let's do that. Tammy, let's send them into some breakout rooms again. If Loy, Ian, and Rob could pop in and out of the breakout rooms, and Tammy and I could stay in the main room.
Okay, it's starting now.
All righty, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All righty, so let's take a look and see who is still in our main room. Some of the same faces stay in. Stephanie, Steve are with us as well.
We're trying to move Stephanie.
Loy, you want to pop in and out of some of the rooms?
Yes, I'm doing that. I'm just waiting for to fill up because sometimes I go there and there's only one person in there because it hasn't been, assigned the people yet.
There's
Okay.
4 and 5 people in each room right now. So you should be
Sounds
good.
good. So
Karen and Stephanie Karen and Jennifer are on unsupported devices, so for some reason it won't move them today. I don't. Sorry
and we
about
have,
that.
I think Steve is with us as well.
Yes, I don't. I keep trying to move him, but
That's okay. Steve, can you hear us?
he might be in a room. Stephanie, can you
Okay.
hear us?
I have a guest, Jennifer.
No, so it's just Jennifer and Karen. Karen is in under the guest today.
All righty.
Okay,
So-
go ahead.
We talked about it. Let's expand on a little bit about the games that we made with the toys that we have in there.
I'm not sure why I'm unsupported. I've used Blue Jeans before. I'm on my Northeastern work account for Blue Jeans,
Yeah,
so I'm
I
sorry,
don't know.
Tammy.
That's okay. It's not a problem. I'm sorry that you're not in the other breakout rooms. It's saying this user is unsupported client and can't be placed in the breakout room. So I don't know. Sometimes that happens. It's just kind of funky. But,
Okay. Well, I'm happy to be here with you.
okay. Go ahead,
Me too.
Tommy.
Okay, so we started talking about it before, and you both had ideas about toys that you find in the garage or outside and different ways that you could use them to make some games. So let's see if we could build on that and make a new game, a new soccer game for ourselves. So what are some of the things that you have in your garage, basement, shed to be safe to use for games?
I personally like soccer squash. When you have a wall, you can play soccer squash with someone. And if you're by yourself, you can do some different kinds of patterns of skills with movements. Try to visualize, we should try to get the kids, I think, to visualize like how and when those W's come back into play, like, when they're playing a certain position, how they might be able to apply this or that kind of situation skill. Or even soccer tennis. I love soccer tennis.
Can you go into the soccer squash? How do you play soccer squash?
So if you and I were playing together, you can make up your own rules. You can pass it. You can have it on the ground for younger players. You can have it on volleys for the older players. You can get your body behind it, receive, and maybe volley it back in. And then I jump out, you would jump in, and you would play, and you would get your body behind it and do the same thing. Try to receive with whatever body part and volley it back or pass it back, depending on what the age or level of the players are.
So all you need is a soccer ball, a wall, and whatever space you could have. Can you play it in the street? Do you need to be on grass?
You can play it with any wall. It could be with grass. It could be your garage wall. It could be an outer exterior wall, part of the driveway. However, it will work for the players, whatever space they have. It could be a smaller space, and they work mostly just technique and lighter pace.
So what's what keeps the game going? So what are the rules of the game?
You can set up a boundary and say if the ball goes outside, you only have one touch, or whatever the players can create and imagine. So if they play it for a little while and the ball's out of bounds too much, maybe they allow play out of bounds for a certain number of touches. And if the player can't return it, it's the other players score their point.
Cool. So it's just kind of taking turns hitting a ball.
Taking turns hitting a ball, and if they can position properly and return it, then they're safe. They don't, and if the other player can't return it, they get the point.
So that's my job. If I'm actually striking the ball, I'm trying to give you a challenging ball to try to play.
Yes, but it has to also be within reason. So you don't want them smashing a ball and that can't be returned. So they want it's kind of hard. It's like when you're playing tennis with someone, you don't want to hit it so hard that you hit it out of bounds. It has to have a sort of an element of control as well.
Sure. Sounds like we're on to something here. Jennifer, anything you would add to that game, or do you have a different game that comes to mind?
I like that idea. It's Karen, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's, just the number of volleys. I think usually, kids want to get more volleys in. How many can I string together? 5, 6 would be great. Maybe the older kids can get to 12, depending on how, like you said, those rules are. And that just gets up their heart rate up, right? So I think, sometimes when we think as coaches, we think about little games like this, and I think this is where you might be getting at, Tommy, is, even if the game doesn't have a specific fitness function or skill function, in the back of our minds, we're kind of thinking, what is that skill, right? And
Mm-hmm.
for soccer squash, it's getting in front of the ball, receiving it, getting control of it if you allow a couple of touches, and then being able to strike it well enough so that it goes back against the wall. So I think it definitely hits on some nice skill work there, especially in close quarters. And in the tighter you make the court lines, the more challenging it is.
But the bigger you make those court lines, now you start adding that component of fitness. So how much they have to move around. I think sometimes it seems like coaches try to set something up, and in the coach's mind, they're like, well, I want to work on fitness. Like, well, sometimes the game in and of itself will create its own fitness just by how we set it up. So as the coach, and it's usually coach's prerogative, say, how do I want this game to be? Do I want this game to be more of a technical game in a tight space? Or do I want to open it up some? So possibly in Karen's game, how can I make it so that there's actually more ground to cover between shots? And the kids come off the field huffing and puffing, and they don't realize they just did a fitness activity, because for them it was just a fun game.
Yeah, we have at our high school we have a cement wall that local contractor built, for lacrosse.
Yep.
One of those huge, it's like 15 feet high, about 2 feet thick at the base, this big cement wall. And sometimes if my kids and I can get on that field before the whole virus, we would just do this exact same game. Just play soccer, squash, racquetball, call it tennis, whatever you want, just back and forth. Sometimes wailing it pretty hard at that cement wall. But now that the school grounds are closed, you're not allowed to go use those facilities. So I think the sides of brick walls at schools make sense without any windows. I just put in new garage doors at my house, so I don't want my kids using my garage doors.
Good
I
idea.
have the back of my garage is solid, like the back side. So my daughter used to kick the ball off the back of the garage all the time. It was like boom, boom, boom. But I mean, so she didn't have to go anywhere, and she could play the game without a rebounder, without a school wall. So most houses, I mean, I don't know, all houses have at least one wall where there's not a window. So if they can position themselves, that's helpful.
Well, just so you know, every famous player has a story about something that they broke growing up. So
That is true. That is true.
And you're right. It's just trying to find that safe spot. It might be traveling, to the school when the school's open, or modifying it. I had some people that were telling me that they would play a similar game to that, just using the height of the curb. They had a curb that was maybe 6 inches high, and they said that's what they used. Hey, it works. It changes the game some, but they made it work. How are we doing for time?
We have 1 second, so let me bring everybody back. And they're on their way.
All righty. Thanks, Jennifer and Karen. Those some neat games. I might have to steal them.
I want to go out and try them today. Not my new
Well,
garage doors, though.
No.
No, come on. Just suck those dents out afterwards. Not a big deal. Just a little heat, a blow dryer. You're all set.
That was before we convened. I just heard Jenny talking about the garage door, and that was always my litmus test for when a parent told me how serious their child was about soccer or lacrosse or anything. I'd say, okay, well, how many dents do you have in your garage door? And they would say, well, nothing. I said, okay, your child's not that serious. I mean,
That's not true though, Mike.
oh yeah.
Marissa
Okay,
bangs that fall
the
off
fence,
the back of
the neighbor's
back of my
fence.
house.
Okay, yeah, the back of the house, the shingles, but that was, yeah, that would be my question: is how many broken shingles, how many broken windows, how dented is the garage door? And then if they say, well, it really isn't, okay, then I guess they're practicing then inside. So
Or broken fences in the backyard or bent fences. Yeah.
right. Right now, with
But
all the
every famous player has a story about something they broke growing up.
fences these days are too easy to break. They're all plastic.
Yeah, that's true.
So, Tammy, how we doing? Is everybody back?
Everybody's back, Tommy.
Okay. Mike, you were in a room. Did anybody in your room come up with, or did your room work together to create a game?
Yeah,
You could share?
our game was to have all the adults go out back and have the kids bring in beers. No. No.
Game solved. Session's
So
over.
we thought, okay, what's in the garage that pretty much everybody has in the garage, and right away it came to mind was recyclables. We've got plastic water bottles, probably either that or liter bottles or pasta, glass or whatever it is, jars. But it's to go for bowling. Is to set them up, set them up out in the backyard, make a little bowling game out of it, and they'd have to get like 10 yards away and pass the ball down. And after they pass the ball, they'd have to run and get it the second after it hit a few, to run it back and then pass it again and keep until they got all the water bottles down for a bowling game. And you time it, so you would have a competition, either yourself and your child or two other children. So that was definitely one of the ideas that everybody's got a recycling bin for sure. So that was one of the ideas that we came up with.
Sure. I think you could also add the fitness aspect in it, the kid getting their ball and bringing it all the way back.
Right.
So
That's exactly it.
thank you.
Yeah, it wasn't run and pick it up. It was run and dribble it back and then shoot again.
Try it again.
Right.
Sure. Thanks for that. Rick, do you have any games that you had discussed? I'm throwing you under the bus with a cold call.
Actually, I was in Mike's group, and Mike, I think we talked about what we could do with tables, or picnic benches, and use them as like a carom board, so that you could strike a ball against one of those surfaces and carom it into some sort of bottles or what have you.
Sure. So different variations of just hitting targets.
Yeah.
Great. I'm telling you what, I have some ideas that might have to be stolen and moved into activities. Any other games from the other breakout rooms that we could share? Or Loy, if anybody's typing anything into the chat room of games?
No, they're not right now. They're just listening to everybody else. But now we might see. Nope, there is nothing in there.
All right. Karen, since we know we had a game, do you want to share your game with us?
I was just typing that in. Yeah, I mean, we talked about soccer squash, where if you have a buddy you can play with, or a sibling, or a parent who's played and wants to play, you can just have a wall. It could be really any wall. It could be a ball inside a garage wall. It could be on the outside. And just depending on the level of the players, they can choose to do something on the ground or in the air, receiving an aerial ball, getting the body behind it, volley it back, and then next they step out, the next person steps in, and they have to play the ball. And if it goes outside the area, they can stipulate how many touches they feel or bounces, however they want to kind of regulate it. And depending on the size they have available or however they want to play in terms of the distance from the wall they want to play. They can make some changes, try some different variations.
Sure. So it's basically striking a ball, but almost like a racquetball game or a game where you take turns hitting the ball. And we had, in our discussion, we also brought up that we could adjust the space of it if we're sharing it with our team, that it now very quickly becomes a fitness game. If that space becomes bigger and you're tracking down a ball that you have to play back, that becomes more of a challenge. And it also could become a very technical game because talking to some of my friends growing up and what they had to work with, they were literally playing a similar game to that and only using the height of the sidewalk. So if you only had a 6-inch sidewalk, the accuracy of making sure the ball hits that and comes back again becomes harder and harder. Loy, any other games that we see in the chat room? Karen, thank you
Yes.
for that.
Yes, Lawrence is saying about two players, each with a ball and a water bottle. Uncap the water bottle. Of course, both water bottles have water in it. Put it aside, and one player takes a turn first to try to hit the water bottle of the opponent. And then the other does the same. The player who gets the other's water bottles empty of water wins.
Sounds good. So kind of another striking the ball game
Okay.
that we could knock it
yeah.
into there. Any other games in there?
Jennifer and Rick are talking about getting a table, tip it over, and use it to play pong, like hitting back and forth. Okay. And that's it we have so far. And we have so far a lot of older kids, they just like to play video soccer games on TV.
We also have Doug mentioned that his high schooler gets outside and works on his skills. And one thing that his team is actually doing is recording the skills and putting it up on Instagram, or they have an account to do it. So it embraces both the skills and then the technology.
We also have
Doug. Hold on, Lloyd. Can you hold for
Yes,
a
sir.
second? If Doug can unmute himself and just kind of tell us about how the players are responding to the Instagram challenge that's been created.
Hi. Yeah. So I have a high schooler, and mostly he gets outside on his own. He'll either run or do some stuff. And it's funny. Someone mentioned the garage door. I had to go out and get one of those bounce back things to spare my garage and all the light fixtures on the side. But they've started. They have an Instagram account, and what they're doing is, because they're all supposed to be on their own, so they shoot. They've been asked to shoot some videos of themselves. Doesn't even 30 seconds to a minute. What they're doing. It's easy enough to set up a phone on the ground and record themselves, and it kind of embraces the technology, gives them all ideas. Like I said, my son has a bounce back, so he's doing stuff where he's juggling and bouncing it back and trapping, and he'll set up some cones. But that's kind of one way to embrace the technology, and I wonder if that's a way that even some of the younger kids could get involved with that too.
Sure, I think that's lots of things that could come when the kids are interacting with one another. Are the kids kind of creating chats with each other or challenges to see who does what the best?
So it's only, this is kind of new within the last couple of weeks, but I think it's almost kind of like a competition who can do the coolest trick juggles, or who can do the fastest things. So I don't know if they're chatting behind the scenes. I only see the end result, but we're seeing some good involvement, and kids are posting stuff more regularly, so it's getting them all more involved, and for us coaches now we're seeing they're actually doing some stuff, which is good.
That's ultimately what we want to get, is trying to get them out of them, get them outside and playing something. Loy, any other in the chat
Yes, Mike Borslov is saying soccer dodgeball. That was a lot played in the streets of Philadelphia, Trenton, etc., etc. We have that. We also have soccer tic-tac-toe. Okay, we've seen videos in YouTube of that. Guardiola I know a video that he got his players to get soccer tic-tac-toe, and that's it.
Sounds like we have some ideas. Hopefully, we might see them on Mass Youth before too long. But some of the things that we think about is encouraging the kids to get outside and play games. And it seems like a lot of the information that's coming to them is trying to get them to train, which is a challenge because sometimes the thought of training, especially in the time that we're in, doesn't really seem as motivating as you would want. So trying to come up with games that they could play without even knowing that they're playing, that they're working on fitness or working on technique, might be a route to go. And it's not the route for everybody. Some kids want to get out there and actually train. And you see them, they're out running, they're out working on stuff on their own. But some kids, it's trying to find a way to sneak it in there, both to give them an activity, but also something that comes up with that they could get out there and work on improving their soccer game. Some of the games that I came up with along the way and listening to the conversations, I think some of them are very similar, but it's games like trying to flick a soccer ball into a garbage can. Now, a strong suggestion is to put a trash can liner in the garbage can because sometimes they could be pretty gross. So making it a little bit more sanitary, but just trying to chip it in or bounce it and kick it in or playing with a partner that you're working together to try to get it in. A game such as Foursquare, and we start thinking about stuff that's around the house, shoes and socks and extra soccer balls, and giving yourself enough space so that you can adjust to it and modifying the rules if you'd have to do that. Another one was just, which I think's been mentioned several times, is soccer golf. Just finding targets around the yard. Might be lawn tools like a wheelbarrow, not something that they're going to be climbing on, but something that they could try to hit. Or how do you get to the target? Could be something that we could help them with or see how creative they can be. For example, if we look at the soccer golf picture, maybe a target hole might be you have to go around the tree and hit the rock, or start at the rock and you cannot hit the tree, or just giving them different challenges on how they could get there. And then another one I saw that wasn't so much kids playing, but it was at going by a park, and there was a bunch of it was an Italian club, actually, I think it was, and it was all these elderly Italian men sitting around playing bocce. And they had people watching them, and there's 3 or 4 courts, and they were just playing the game. And right away, I started thinking about, okay, how could we make that into a soccer game? And sometimes that's what it's going to take us to get the kids out there on the field, trying to hide the soccer in the games without them even knowing it. So with that, we've been putting these together, trying to put a bunch of these together, and we've actually added them onto our website for you to come up, for you to share with your players or with your family. But by no means is this a finite list. We come up with lots of good games, and flipping over tables to use the flat side of it as something as a rebounder, or finding the hockey stick in the garage, or paper plates to use as boundaries. I think we come up with lots and lots of games for the kids to play. We just have to find a way to safely sneak in a soccer ball and have that game, make that game something that they can use, make that game something that they could use at home with their friends and with their family. So, a short one, but I'd like to thank everybody for attending tonight. Next week, we have, before we sneak away, next week we do have a couple webinars coming up. On Thursday at 6:30, we have goalkeeping activities with Carl Spratt. Lloyd's going to be with us on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, and that's more of an open forum, so we could talk about anything that we want to talk about.
Ask.
Ask and talk and chat just about soccer and what we could do out on the field. Having said that, we're never in a rush to leave. So even if we don't go the full hour, hopefully through some discussions or shared ideas or questions that you might have, follow-up questions, we'll be staying on for as long as we need to carry on those, to share in those ideas. So again, thank you all very much for joining in and attending. And if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box or just share them with us. Lloyd, anything else in the chat box?
Not right now. Just thank you. Thank you for another wonderful meeting. Thank you again, guys. Looking forward to the next one. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, guys. It was fun. Thank you. Always good stuff. Thank you for having these sessions. That's Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer, for listening.
Thanks, everybody. Great job,
Thank
guys
you,
and
Mike.
gals. Thank you.
Thanks,
Great work,
everybody.
everybody.
Thanks, Mike.
Jeff is still on. Jeff, did you have any comments or questions?
He's gone.
Nope. Okay,
So now
it's
it's
just the
these
four of
three
us.
guys, you, Robbie, and Tamiendo. Only the four of us. Yeah.
The baby
Rob, is
house.
that social distancing?
Yeah, they're quiet at the moment because they have worms on the trampoline, so I'm just leaving them to do their own thing.
Are they
So when
playing
they
with the
jump up to
worms?
the worms, like go flying.
Oh, yeah, look, she is playing. They collect worms, and they've got this little box that they
Hi,
put them in
guys.
with mud and whatnot. Can you say hi?
Oh my,
So, yeah.
that looks like lots of fun. Science project for today.
Oh yeah.
Worms
That's
too.
another
right.
game. Dribbling the ball to get the worms.
Cut the worms in
Well, that's
half
what I
and
was-
see them scatter.
It was funny because
Go ahead.
I was in a room with Steve Russo, and he was talking about all these games that he plays with his kids. And so I literally don't get to choose what we play at all. I just get told what we play. And then if I'm not doing it right, I get shouted at.
That's the
Isn't
way
that
it's
how it's
supposed to
supposed to be?
It's their game, right?
It's exactly how it's supposed to be, yeah.
They dictate the game, and we just
Yes.
go along with it.
You're just a guest in the
Yep.
world.
You got it. But
How were the breakout rooms?
Good. I
The
went through
first
all of
one,
them.
I had only had 2 rooms set up because when I set them up and right before I sent everybody in, it should have been more than enough. And then I don't know if everybody logged onto the call at once, but they all kind of jumped in. So those rooms were a little crowded, I think, in the first round.
Don't worry about it because a lot of people didn't have the cameras and the microphones on, so they just were listening. I went into a room that was Russo and Jeff, and they're the only ones talking. The other people didn't even answer when I say, "Hey, can you hear each other?"
I know. So, do you think that we should put something in that it's helpful to have your camera and your, on for these? Not required, but helpful because there'll be some interaction.
this is still
Oh, is
recording,
this still-
by the way.
Yeah.
Um,